You can go, Brent.
I'm actually on air. Hi. Hello, everyone. And
you missed my finger there.
I missed the finger. Say, hey, you're on. Yeah. But this is Brent Frain, and I'm from Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. I'm the host. And today I have Sherry Caldwell joining me on the show. And Sherry's going to be talking about accessible housing, about the child disability benefit. And Sherry's also going to be talking about supports for caregivers. Sherry, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure having you join me on my show. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you coming and talking about these important issues that affect Canadians, definitely. And regardless of the age, everyone can be born with a disability. They can develop a disability at any point in time in their life. And as they get older, we as society, we get more different disabilities. Maybe some of them that are physical or they're invisible disabilities. And they affect children all the way up to, until the end of time. And so having you coming on talking about these important issues that affect individuals, for sure, it's so important. And so I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. There's not enough, I think, talk about this population, and disability doesn't discriminate. Like you said, it affects every age, every race, social, economic factor. It's a welcoming group, and it seems to be quite marginalized population that sadly the government is really, really slow to react.
Yeah, and it's the largest marginalized population, really, and it's been marginalized for, as I've said, 30 to 40 years, and that's just like, well, yeah. that's fine, and it's not fine.
No, it's not. It's definitely not fine at all. It's been escalating more and more over decades, and it's some people I'd say, well, it's a systemic issue, but is it really? I guess we break down the word systemic. Like, is it really orchestrated? As a system? I think it's just more that governments just have ignored it. In time, over centuries, people have always had disabilities. It's never not been there. It's just over time, it's just evolved into how do we modernize going forward? I guess should we say it's how do we change the system going, or the government's perspective on how they see people with disabilities in Canada and around the world. Like, it's how we have to accept people for who they are, and it doesn't matter who they because they have a disability, do they need to be treated differently? No, absolutely not. They don't need to be treated differently. They have to be accepted into society. And a lot of the government officials, even from MPs, even admit that federal MPs admit that the system, how it's designed, or how it was designed decades ago, was just not right. And they even admit that too. So that's a good thing, right? That they admit that there's a problem, we need to now go forward. But as you said, Sherry, they're slow at getting around to changing things. And maybe when we have time, maybe we'll dive in about the Bill C-22, the Canada Disability Benefit. If we have time on that, I'll get your take on that. But maybe let's start with the accessible housing and how important that needs to be for Canadians with disabilities in this country.
Yeah, accessible housing is essential for for people with disabilities, well-being, safety, security. It's home. But I've been involved in disability advocacy since my daughter was born. So she's actually 18 and she uses a wheelchair to walk her. So when my husband and I bought our home, no one expects, it was before she was born, no one expects to have a child with a disability. You're gonna have kids, and at least it was kind of an awakening to me when Ashley was born. I had no idea that my child could be born and not able to talk or walk. It was very naive, I guess. I don't know, but I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and there weren't kids with disabilities in my classroom. Or I hope there's more awareness today. My daughter's been, she's just finishing grade 12, and she's been going to school in her home school and in her community. So I hope the children in our community will understand that better than I did when she was born.
Yeah.
But so our home is 2 steps coming in. We have 2 levels. So she, like, oftentimes I have to carry her up the stairs to bed at night. She's small for her age because of her diagnosis. So it's still doable, but if we did want to move to an accessible home, which we would like to, they just really don't exist. They're very hard to find. And sometimes, so you could either have a child and not be in a home, or you could have an accident. So the very worst time of your life, let's say you're out riding your bike or a car accident, and all of a sudden you're injured, you're in the hospital, you can't go to work, and you can't return home to your home. You just can't get in the door. You can't use the shower. It puts a tremendous cost on the government. To have to come in with extra, sometimes home care, just to help you shower or do laundry or those kind of things. Or it's not right. We need to be proactive. And so I've been involved I sit on the Accessible Housing Network, which is a network started by this lady, Kate Chung, in Toronto. She is in her 80s, and she is a force to be reckoned with. You should have her as a guest on your show.
Yeah, and you'll reach out to her on that one. Yeah,
I will connect you.
Yes.
She's not on Twitter, but she does Zoom, and yeah, you will love her. So I've learned much what I know about accessible housing from her, because she's very informed. And she's bringing different organizations together to lobby all levels of government for accessible housing. So there's people across Canada on our board, and it seems like it doesn't matter what province you're in, because I'm in Ontario. And finding an accessible home or apartment or condo is really, really hard to find. I mean, affordable is one thing, which I think everyone is talking about, but nobody's talking about accessibility. And what Kate would tell you, and you should have her on, she can go over this better than I can, that it doesn't cost any more money to build an accessible home. Some builders don't want to build an accessible home because they think it's for people that are poor or don't have money, but there are people with disabilities that have money, and especially the aging population. They don't want to go into long-term care. That it's cool, and an accessible, universally designed condo or home will look good. It's not going to look like it's not what people envision. I think in BC, they're much further ahead on accessible. I've heard that they might be changing policy there. Kate brings in lots of really interesting speakers to her meetings, and the Rick Hansen Foundation, I think, has done a lot of work on this area. But in Ontario, it's kind of like pass the buck. So
Yeah.
I just started on my city's Richmond Hill, where I live in Richmond Hills, accessible committee, and they don't want to talk about accessible housing. They're like, oh, the municipality's not in charge of housing, you know, that's provincial. And then you talk to the provincial government about here it would be the Ontario Builders Code. They're, you know, oh, well, like it just feels like it's past the buck. No one wants to
Pass
take
it
a
here and
stand.
pass it there, and yeah, it's not my,
Yeah,
no, you can deal with it. And yeah, well, you know, and then nothing ever gets done then, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's like the left hand tells the right hand, but the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and yeah. And
Well,
then,
I wanted to back up a little bit to
sure.
when you, Sherry, to what you first said, when you like you said you grew up in the 70s, and I did too. Like I was born in 68, so like I was born with cerebral palsy, 1968, and you know, there's a lot of the advocacy, especially in the 60s and early 70s, it comes from, you know, mothers and parents. It wasn't driven by government, and it's not driven by doctors. I mean, when I was born, doctors were telling my mom, and my mom was a nurse her whole life, but doctors were telling my mom to her face, oh, your son's gonna grow up to be a nothing, that like he's gonna be useless, don't expect anything, right? And yeah, but that was the prevailing, that was the common prevailing, you know, I don't want to say attitude. It was just, that was what everybody believed that to be true, even though it wasn't. That was an accepted truth, even though it was a lie, right? So, you know, fast forward, and it's still the case today where so much of the advocacy has to come from you and me and Brent, and it's not driven by government, unfortunately. It's not driven by, you know, the doctors only look at the medical model part of it. They're not really plugged into the social model of it. And I don't really know what the government's plugged into, but they're not really properly engaged in the social or medical model of anything. It's just like, it just seems to like sort of be like, you know, Brent and I always joke is like some of the government policy, like this is take something and then throw it up against the wall, and if it, you know, have a pink unicorn of a clawback and throw it up against the wall, and if it sticks, it's like, if it sticks, it must be good, you know. It's like, let's throw stuff against the wall, and if it sticks, it must be good policy. And I mean, that's not the way to. So my point is that I think even today, like from 1960s to now, it's so much of our advocacy is driven by, you know, grassroots. It's not driven by government. It's not driven by doctors. It's not driven by anything but, you know, people like you, you know.
Yeah, and that's when I you know, when I was a little child, same kind of era around this, what Neil's describing, what you're describing, Sherry. It's when I grew up, you know, when I was in elementary school, doctors, the same thing, would tell my mom, because she, you know, as I grew up, I got to learn all this stuff, and they'd say, well, same thing, you know, Brent's just academically, he's just not going to succeed. Like, it's just don't expect any wonders, because motor skills, because of visual impairment, learning disability. As I grew basically older, I learned a lot more as myself, who I am. Yeah. But basically, I was, you know, kind of secluded in class, and I always remembered that. Well, why do I have to go to this room? Well, they taught me how to touch type, because I'd be faster typing than I was writing. Yeah. And so I was able to keep up with the class. But I said, well, I want to be in the class. No, we don't want you in the class because we don't want you to be picked on, the teacher would say. Well, that was just their way of excluding me from a class, because it was better that way, and I kept asking questions. I wouldn't. Better
for them. Not better exactly. For you, but better for them.
Yeah, and so I got upset, and so, you know, as years went on, I learned to start standing up more for myself and realizing that it's okay, Brent. It is okay to say how you feel. And when I went through, fast forward to college, you know, I did a lot of speaking in class, of doing videography, and the class would grade you on it, and grade me on it. So we all got to take turns and telling your life story of who you are, and what did you accomplish, what do you want to accomplish. And that was really, it was hard because I really had to really analyze myself, and then I had to grade myself. Well, what did I do okay on that, or what could I do better on my own video? So yeah, and then of course, then fast forward as I mentioned before the show started, like people would say, "Well, who are you, Brent?" So like as I went on my advocacy, I realized that I had a knack, and I just didn't know what that knack. I knew like I had a lot to do with advocacy of helping people, of bringing people together, but I didn't know how to do that. And that's when I approached Neil, and in 2021, like Neil and I would stay in contact here and there, like because we knew another person in another advocacy organization.
Brent was the 375 guy. Brent was known as the 375 guy, the shelter 375 shelter, and I was known as the clawback guy, and we just kind of knew each other that way on Twitter.
Yeah, and so I kept hammering at the government saying it's just not okay. You can't rent anywhere for 375, and I just kept pounding them, and how my advocacy really started, Sherry, and all the listeners, and when they listen to it through podcast another time. It all started back in 2007. I went to our BC. I'm in British Columbia, so I went to our BC legislature, and I was advocating. How it started was about minimum wage, and I felt that I was working for a big corporation at the time. And is it wage that is, Brent? Is that the problem? Is it wage that's not enough? I said no. It's about respect and dignity of respecting who I am as an employee, right? And I stood up and I had a camera person here, and I'm live, like they're recording me live on location. And my employer at the time got so mad. They saying, "No, get that camera off. What are you doing?" And so I realized, okay, like you could lose your job out of this. I go, hey, you know what? It is what it is. Like I'm standing up for myself and British Columbians, and any other province. I said across the country at that time. I said. Because other provinces will copy what BC does. It seems to be kind of that way. So I got out there very vocal, and I went to our legislature. I asked to speak to the premier at the time. Oh, he was in a meeting. He wasn't convenient. I said, well, I'm here. I went out of my way. So if I'm here, how come he can't be here? So so the Federation of Labor, the president, I met with them. Quite a feisty guy, but awesome. He taught me a lot, and I for the goodness of my heart, I really thank him. And I know where he is now. He's actually the CEO for Fraser Health now. I saw him just recently on the TV. I'm like, hey, I know him. I said, he taught me well. He said, stand up for yourself, Brent. Just stay how it is. Don't worry about the cameras. Don't worry about who's watching, listening. You say it, how it is. And so from that point on, my advocacy was like stand up and push forward. And so when I realized that the shelter rate was too low, and I thank you, Neil, for bringing that up, because that was kind of intertwined with wages is not meeting to pay for your shelter, like your housing, because that was too low too, and mine was supplemented because of the income still wasn't enough to pay the shelter, so I kept fighting forward. And so this is where I'm at, is I came up with the idea of Canadians with Disabilities and their allies, and I approached Neil back in 2021, and we said, let's just wing it. We've never done this before, but hey, why not? So we launched onto Twitter Space, and as time went on, we evolved over to this platform, having the guests come onto Zoom, and it's always gone onto YouTube, so we broadcast onto YouTube. And it's awesome having guests like yourself, Sherry, join us and talking about the important aspects of what Canadians with disabilities go through in their life, and regardless of the age. And I welcome anyone who's watching this live or listening to this later on or watching this later on. Join us. Contact Neil, and we'll get you scheduled in.
Yeah, and like, share, and subscribe, and share it around, because that's how it gets seen more. And like I've said the last couple of shows, it's like, you know, having a bunch of subscribers is nice, and we always want more subscribers, but it's also who is listening to is important, right? And we know for a fact that we're getting the attention of, you know, prominent MLAs and ministers, and that's important, right? Because it's the who is listening is really important, and that's what's going to move the needle forward and really push the advocacy forward, is getting the people that with the power and influence to do something about it, right?
Yeah, and you know, and it comes down to just people just talking about what they're going through, how it affects their family members, and it's so important to get that message out there to the public of saying, like, people watch the news and say, oh well, this is what they're hearing. Well, they're only hearing part of the story, only a little fraction of the story. You could have a whole 2-hour segment, and the news hour will cut it right down to like maybe 5 minutes. Well, is that really telling the whole story? No, it's not. And,
you said that before we launched, Sherry, about you know that you've done media segments that were but they're only like 2 or 3 minutes, and I know Jeff Leggett has done a lot of media spots too, and he's really good at, you know, they'll say you have 30 seconds, and he's been really good at, you know, giving a 30-second soundbite, but that's it, right? That's all you have, and
well, because there's more to the story. Yeah, there's more to the story.
And this is why these conversations are good, because it's an extended look at everything, right? Not just 30 seconds.
We don't just trim it down after going, okay, so this was good, this is good. We don't want it. Nobody wants to hear that part. Well, they do want to hear that part, right? Yeah. And so as time went on, Sherry, I learned to realize that this is like who I am, and I project it out, and then people say, wow, yeah, I have that common interest too. Yeah, okay, let's talk about it. And I had gone through an assessment testing of saying, like, who are you, Brent? What do you want to do in life? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And now that was challenging. I must admit, to focus on your weaknesses. And I had a doctor sitting here going through it, and I got paid to go to it. I got paid to buy lunch, dinner. Like, it was like long sessions, and I was going to college at the time. You can imagine. So I'm going to college, and I'm learning about myself, and I had to bring that information back to the college and talk about what I was going through. And they're saying, well, you could be a talk show host, Brent. You could be anything, communications and all this stuff. And I'm going, wow. You could work in the hotel industry. And so I thought, yeah, okay. So I went to the hotel industry, and my self-esteem for a while, it went from here. I did a career move, and that was awesome. I'm like, hey, I was working in a hotel. I was working at a front desk. I was doing a host position for a while, and I got an opportunity, and I had relocated myself. And then I got working in a restaurant first until that position came available. I did the transition. And so then the hotel said, yeah, I got a full-time job for you. I'm like, wow, because I took my course in it. So I got there, and then the hotel said, well, unfortunately, due to seniority, they brought a full-time person back who wanted to come back, have the position back. I got doing catering. That's not, well, I mean, I took it. That's not what I wanted to do. And then the hotel closed down. They shut down completely. They got bought out. So that was it. And then I couldn't find anything out in that industry. And so I kind of did some brainstorming. And I thought, okay, I was kind of lost within myself for a while, trying to figure out, well, what do I want to do now? Now it's like, so I thought, okay, there must be something. And so fast forward, and I took other courses, and to realize that there's other things that I could maybe look at doing. And now I enjoy advocacy and doing all this, and just and I'm going to expand it as we're going on with it. I have visions of where I want it to go, and I think it's going to be awesome, really awesome. And having more guests involved and the listeners involved.
It is funny how you kind of just fall into the advocacy, though, isn't it? Because I mean, I've been disabled my whole life, and I never really thought it was that big of a deal. Like I've said before, like I worked for 20 years, and I never was on disability until I turned like 41 or so. So I've only been on for maybe 14 years, the last 14 years. But prior to that, like I've said before, I mean, I always thought that, of course, the government takes care of people that are disabled, right? Of course they get enough. I mean, I just assumed, right, that was the case. And it wasn't until my first wife passed away that it was like, and then they clawed back the survivor's pensions. Like, what? I just assumed it was a mistake, like a clerical error, and and that really awokened like a fierceness in me. Like I have, like, it just was a profound injustice. It's like, and then I was already working for the Disability Foundation at the time, and so everything just kind of did this intersection, and so I worked for the Disability Foundation for 7 years or so, and like I was always very introverted. Like like if you take me to a party, like I'm kind of the guy that sits at the back of the room or whatever, and I'll just kind of watch other people have fun. Like that's always been me. Or I'll pick one person to talk to, and there'll be a whole room full of people. I'll pick maybe one person to talk to, kind of thing. So I've always been really introverted, and so it wasn't until I got involved with the Disability Foundation that I was actively having to like meet total strangers, people with disabilities, meet total strangers, and talk about their life experience and talk about what they want to do for a job and things like that. So I was like always meeting tons and tons of people just for coffee and stuff, and then it forced me to be more extroverted. Like, but that's not me naturally, right? So it's just kind of weird how everything kind of just does this, right?
So I was, when I was a kid, we'd go for a car ride. My dad would take me for a car ride, and my mom would be there. My mom never drove, so my dad did. And then when I was young, my mom, they separated, so my dad went his own way. But I remember him taking us for a car ride. And I'd be in the back seat, and they're like, "Is Brent awake?" I remember hearing this, and I'd be like so quiet, like I could hear a pin drop. And I'd be like so shy because I like, and that's how I was. Like I was like, I didn't know like it was okay to speak up, it was okay to say something, because and I was always kind of shut down. And when I was in school, and like saying like, what you need to say, Brent, is not important. And I had a teacher who used to say that to me when I was really young, like wait till you are asked to speak, Brent. And I thought, oh. And then one of my teachers further up in elementary, I guess, heard about that. It must have been some kind of, and someone said, no, she said, no, that wasn't okay, Brent. Like, ignore what that teacher said.
Yeah.
Oh, so it is okay to, so yeah, put your hand up. Well, no, you need to go to the washroom. Oh, okay. No, just go. Don't put your hand up. And that's kind of like with PWD now going forward. It's like, I kind of relate that to saying, well, can you leave the province for 30 days? No, just go. It's like, but it's a policy, right? So I guess with that, I want to dive into, Sherry, about the child disability benefit. How do you vision that, like for children?
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, your stories really resonated with me. But for children with disabilities today, caregivers and children are really struggling financially. Disability is very expensive. And so in Ontario, and I don't know, maybe it's better in BC a little bit, or exactly where other provinces stand. I think that children with physical disabilities or developmental disabilities like Down syndrome, or many other rare diseases, my daughter has a very rare, we don't have access to therapies, to funding. In Ontario, parents have to pay 25% of the costs of walkers and wheelchairs, ramps. So, and like my daughter was born very medically fragile. And we spent probably a year in sick kids, and then she came home. My husband has a good job, so we have privilege, and we were able to purchase the therapy that she needed, which has helped her greatly. But in Ontario, children with physical disabilities get consultation, so they basically talk to the teachers at school about what your child needs, and that there isn't support. So that's not going to give you help for what your child might need for speech or physio. And in Ontario, what happened was the Ontario Autism Coalition, they became very loud. And so now in Ontario, if your child has autism, there's a program called the Ontario Autism Program, and they fund therapy that these children needed, but children with other disabilities don't get that funding. So kids, and some kids that did some advocacy with me, one young man, Dante, he was born with CP, and he hasn't had physio his whole life. I think they give it here. You have to really, if you're in a crisis. So that's when my advocacy began, was around when they launched the OAP, the Ontario Autism Program. A bunch of parents were like, what? Like, okay, why that distinction? And just fund one high incidence disabilities. We thought the government could be inclusive and would support all families and all children, but that was 6 years ago. That got us started. But as I created the group, and it's on Facebook, it's called Ontario Disability Coalition. I founded it with some other moms. Us moms have, we're mama bears, so we have concerns. We started hearing from many Ontarians that were on disability adults with living on ODSP, and our kind of focus changed from therapy at the beginning to home care, school supports, and then disability poverty. And if you look at your question was the child disability benefit. That's just a little bit of a background. But the child disability benefit was in Justin Trudeau's mandate letter to Minister Carla Quattro in 2019 that they needed to split. And that didn't happen that year. And then COVID came. And then, so there are in Ontario, and I'm sure across Canada, some single mothers in Ontario with the children that can have really severe disabilities. Some of them like ICU level care in the home that live on what we call Ontario Works, which is like $700 a month, and have to pay for different supplies. Many things are not covered under the Ontario. They haven't really evaluated the ADP, is like the assistive device program in Ontario, which is like syringes or different pieces of medical equipment that you might need.
And those are costly.
Different things, yeah. There's a lot of cost to that, and the government just kind of turns a blind eye to these stories. So what I do, similar to you, is these families come together, they share their stories, we write policy briefs, and we meet with the minister, and we try to get them with the different ministries and we keep just sharing the stories and sharing the stories. And writing policy briefs and writing budget submissions. And so we were doing that for about five years, when the last year we started focusing on the federal government, because we're like, okay, we can talk to a blue in the face to our provincial government.
Yeah.
They did do some things to help us. They did invest in early intervention, which was a bit of a win. A lot of people were advocating for it, because even kids born, you'd be born with maybe cerebral palsy or some other clearly needed like physiotherapy at birth, and you just be put on a wait list, could last like 2 years. Like there's no early intervention services. Like it exists, but it's not staffed. So
and I just wanted to again kind of rewind back to what you said earlier again. I'm really listening and picking up on what you're saying, but I just wanted to rewind a bit, Sherry, because not many people are going to recognize the name I'm going to say, but there was a woman, her name was Charlotte Whitten, and I believe she was born or existed around maybe 1890 in Canada. I think she was, now I'm going to have to look this up, but I think if my memory's correct, she was like one of the first female. I think she was a mayor for Ottawa back in 1890, and she was also considered like one of the early feminists of Canada, right? And the reason I mentioned her is that I think back when I was like 14, for my birthday, from my aunt, I got a calendar of quotes, famous quotes from politicians and it was called the curmudgeon calendar, you know, and when I think of curmudgeon, I always think of Stollygosters, you know, with Ellen, but you know, the curmudgeon calendar, and one of the quotes in the calendar, it was just one of these desk calendars, and it was 365 of these quotes. But one of the quotes in there, and I remember it really stuck with me, and it was, like I said, I was only 14 at the time, but it really stuck with me. One of the quotes in there was from Charlotte Whitten, and like I said, it's a feminist quote, and she said, "Whatever a woman does, she must do twice as good as a man to be considered half as good, or twice. She must try twice as hard to be considered half as good as a man." Kind of. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it, but it's kind of like that, right? And so that's a kind of a feminist quote, right? But when I read it, I remember thinking to myself, like, that's kind of a disability lens too, because growing up, like, I always felt that I had to try twice as hard
to prove
myself, right? So you're always have the deck kind of stacked up against you, like, I have to really like force myself and prove myself to be considered like half as good as anybody else. And that's a quote, like I said, that's stuck in my. I'm like, you know, 55 years old now, so it's stuck with me for over 40 years now. You know,
for sure.
And
I mean,
you know,
absolutely. You know, and I think back on kind of like those quotes, and I think back of over time of different ministers or MPs over time, and it seems like even within this last decade, or maybe a decade and a half, is that same theme, and I'm sure we all hear it, is there's more to do. There's more to do. It doesn't matter what level of government is, provincial or federal, there's more to do.
There's another pink unicorn that gets slammed against the wall.
I hear you. Or dignified, more to do. It's like, geez, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, they say the words, right? Because they say things like stigma is bad, or, you know, stigma this, stigma that, but then they don't really equate it to disability. When they talk about stigma, they're talking about the safe drug supply, and then that's it. And they don't really, you know, the disability quotient gets pushed to the side, ignored. It's like, well, we're not talking about stigma for disability. It's just stigma for safe drug supply. That's it. You know,
or some of these computer systems that are so old on how they're designed. And I had a meeting just recently, Sherry, with the minister for Minister for Disability and Poverty Reduction in BC. And the takeaway from it is, well, like, why do you have to wait so long? Because there's a rate increase coming. Well, the computer system is so old, apparently, and it was last updated in 2002. So 21 years, but they said, don't worry, there's a new system coming in 2 more years. But that's the reason why it's so lengthy time of getting things going. I don't buy it. I really don't buy that, because they can get funds out really quickly for other things, for other measures.
Yeah, they proved it during like CERB, right? The federal government got right on that. If it applies to everyone, like, I feel the policies that I do see the federal government, even our provincial government here in Ontario, roll out, if it applies to like all children, like during COVID, they kept having supports for children at home, or like daycare, for instance. So now there's national daycare program, but we know children like my daughter, when she was daycare age, she was on oxygen. And there was no way that she could go. And there's many kids that have significant behavior issues or physical that can't necessarily be accommodated in daycare.
That's right.
We want them to be included in those that can. But then these families, the reason they're supporting daycare is so that they know both mom and dad need to work today to afford rent, food, and income and support a family.
Yeah.
So we my organization is really screaming loudly that like what I call myself is like a lifetime caregiver. Like when my daughter was born, and for her whole age, she's not going to be able to move out because she's got significant needs. I'm going to be caring for her, and she'll be home, and I'm happy to do that. And however, I have to give up my job, pension, retirement, and some single mothers are doing this. And it puts women, I think this is a women's issue too, into poverty and into retirement and poverty. And no one's, I think they talk about caregiving as more of a temporary thing. So it might happen to someone when their mother gets older and they have to look after them for 4 or 5 years, or until they can get them into long-term care, but they're not thinking about the impact on if they're putting the mother and the father in poverty, or just a mom, then the child's also living in poverty. So when they rolled out the Canada Disability Benefit, and they're forgetting about that, you could be born with a disability, with children, and they know who they are.
Of course. They pretend that they don't. How many are in the system? Well, we have to figure that out. It's like, are you kidding me? Yeah.
Yeah, they even know who the mothers on Ontario Works are in Ontario. I know they know that, that have children with disabilities, but they're like, oh, it's fine. We'll keep them at $700 a month. I feel like, it is shameful because I don't think the general population knows or thinks about these families, and it impacts on the kids. If the kids aren't getting what they need, if you don't have the fun, if you can't come up with your 25% for like something like my daughter wears AFOs, these foot orthotics, and children grow, right? So you replace them every year, and they're like about $4,000 annually. And so we have to come up with 25% of them. I'm privileged. I'm lucky. My husband has a job with benefits, but that is rare today in this age. But they're expecting that of all families. So what happens if you can't come up with the money for that? In Ontario, if your family income is around $70,000, there's a program that you can maybe get on that will cover that. But once you're over 70, they're like, oh, you're good. You're making 7,000. You can pick up 25% of the wheelchair, the walker, and still house yourself. A 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto is like $2,500 now. It's just.
That's like here in Victoria, same thing.
Yeah, so I feel for really young families that are really, and it's not even just young families, but struggling.
Yeah,
financially struggling.
And that happened to me too. Like again, I can share. When my first wife passed away, for the first year or so, I kind of just kept up with my job with the Disability Foundation for about a year. It was maybe not quite a year, but almost a year. And then I was a single dad at the time. And had a young son, and so I had a disability, have a young son, and I'm a single dad, and so you just feel like you have to be the Superman, right? Do everything, and hold down a job. And I just realized I just kind of started to crack and realize I can't do it all. I'm not Superman, So I actually took a leave. I said I have to take a leave for about a year, and this is back when I didn't realize that they were going to claw back everything from me. It was still like I just thought the government's gonna do the right thing and not claw things back. But anyway, so I took the year off, and they clawed back over $700 of the survivor's pension. So what I was left with me and my son, I was left with less than $400. It was under $400 of provincial support for me and my son $400 for a year. So this is $400 a month for a year I was doing this, plus $700 pension. So I had $1,100 of support. Only $400 of that was from the government. And so they basically say, screw you as a single dad and a widower. You can get by on $1,100 with you and your son, right? It's like, we'll invalidate your pension. That doesn't matter. You don't need a targeted wraparound support of a pension, right? We'll just throw a pink unicorn at you and we'll invalidate the whole thing. And it really bothered me. It's like I thought that I could step away and kind of recharge my batteries for a year. But instead I was like so stressed because I couldn't afford it. So I put myself in total debt for a whole year. And it was very stressful, right? But I was trying to do, I was trying to heal myself, because for that first year, I was basically putting myself on autopilot and just being a parent and being a parent, being a parent. And I realized, I got to take a little bit of time away and recenter myself. And I got punished for it. The government kind of says, screw you. You deserve $400 a month, and you can live off $400 a month for you and your son. And I'm like, what? And so that's what, that's why I'm so passionate and angry, because, for a whole year, I was expected to live off less than $400 a month for me and my son from the government. They're like, congratulations, here's $400.
I know friends.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
That similarly, like a mother with a very complex child, and she passed away in her mid-30s. So this mother has been looking after this child her whole life. Mm-hmm. And her child, once your child dies, then everything is cut off too, because like even their ODSP or something that she would have to use to make their living workable, right?
Yeah.
And then she literally, like, these mothers are going to retire in poverty, and she had a home that she had to sell. It's devastating at this time when, to me, the way they're treating, they're really leaning on families to a breaking point. So, in Ontario, on ODSP, if you end up homeless, they take away the housing shelter, because then you don't get it. Like, I don't know if they do that in other provinces.
They do that here too. They do that here too.
That's just like kicking someone when they're down. Instead of, I'm hopeful that this Canada Disability Benefit, because there's still a lot of planning to it. So I'm hoping to get more parents and caregivers advocating so that the children and the caregivers can be thought of more. But even for the adults like yourselves that are going to get the benefit, that it's going to actually be significant enough to ensure people can afford housing and food, just the very basics.
I just hope it's not like Carla Qualto doesn't think, well, here's $200 and that's going to be life changing. Like $200 will be nice, but it's not going to be a life changing. That's not a life changing amount. So I hope it's more. I hope it's more than that.
Yeah, because what I'm concerned on is on which formula that how they're going to gauge that Canada Disability Benefit. Is they going to go with what year? Like what fiscal year are they going with the table on how they calculate that? Now, one of the meetings that I was in just recently with one of our advocates that's actually going to be on tomorrow's show, Jeff Leggett. We were in a meeting, and we learned that part of the formula they're using is the market basket measure, not the LICO formula. LICO formula pushes it at no less than $22.02 a month, based on the year 2021 table formula, based on the federal government that they said is the bare bone. That's not even with person with a disability. That's just the bare bone amount needed. It's like when CERB was out, right? $2,000. That was in 2020. So the 2021 formula is 2202. So now we're in 2023. So they haven't even come out with the formula. I mean, they're already 2 years behind. They haven't even come out with this year's rate. We learned that the federal government's going to be going with the market basket measure, not the LICO formula. So I'm a little concerned of what the dollar figure is going to be at for that Canada Disability Benefit. Minister Cointreau was asked several times, over and over, by even senators, how much? It was like, okay, well, don't know. Like, it's like, I'm talking to my counterparts. Well, how long does it take to talk to your counterparts, the premiers? And maybe they have, and they're just staying silent. They don't want to say nothing. Maybe mum's the word. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but
maybe it'll be kind of like a gender reveal party where they'll just have a big balloon, and it'll be like, if it's red dye, it's this amount, and if it's blue dye, it's this amount, or something like that. Well, surprise!
Well, Sherry, I always use my, of course, some of my segments I talk about is the pot of spaghetti. Okay, so I'm just boiling the water, right? I boil the water because that's all you told me to do. It's like building up the bill. You told me to boil the water. Brent, you got to put the noodles in. Oh, really? I didn't know I got to do that. And then after that, then you got to put the sauce in. Oh, well, where do I get that? Figure it out. You've had years to figure it out. But you just told me to boil it. Now the water is evaporated away. The pot's now burnt on the bottom.
Yeah.
Because
and they put some real rules around it, right? Like they've cut out seniors. They're saying it's just for adults. We met. I met with Carla Quattro last year, and we presented our budget submission that is on the Ontario Disability Coalition's blog, the federal one, and we pointed out to her that no one in Ottawa is thinking about children with disabilities, and that we pointed out to her that we knew it was in her mandate letter in 2019, and that she could right now act to raise it. We asked her to triple the child disability benefit, and this is an income tested benefit, so families that have the means, they're not going to receive it. My husband and I, we don't receive it, but the families that need it are going to get it. And that they badly need it today. So we also mentioned to her that, I don't know if you know, but last year they rolled out this home and vehicle, like home accessibility grant. I think it's called multi-generational home renovation tax credit. So it's a tax credit. It's not great for people that don't have money, but even if you have money, if you have a child, they specifically said you had to be 18 and above for seniors and adults. And we're like, Minister Coulter, we can't wait until our child is 18 to make our home accessible. So that we don't want a tax credit. We asked them in our policy brief to create a grant for home and vehicle accessibility, which would be better. But if they are going to even build something, why are they specifically leaving children with disabilities out? Who do they think is supporting these children? Because I can tell you in Ontario, the Ontario government is not.
Yeah. And that's why it should be all the way from when they're just an infant all the way. Like there should be no age category. It's like, I'm glad you mentioned, Sherry, like seniors too. Right, because like this Canada Disability Benefits only got to go up to 64, and now there's some other advocates out there and people with disabilities that are seniors, and all of a sudden there was one person in Alberta, just for instance, he turned 65. Oh, he still has his disability; it didn't go away, but now he has to live just on the pension, senior's pension. But his disability hasn't changed. Nothing's changed.
No. When you turn 65, you're magically healed of all your disabilities, Brent.
You're mad. It's mad. You have pink unicorn. No, you're healed. Right? You don't have a disability anymore.
You don't have a disability. It's gone.
It's like, it reminds me of an eye doctor I went to. Oh, hey, I'm not even going to get into this. It's a long story, but I'll summarize it. I went one time, and I have a hereditary condition. Right, and it's just not curable. There's no cure for my eye condition. My eye condition is what it is, but it also leaves it with astigmatism. So I gotta, Chris, when I was young, I was usually very cautious. I'd be like looking at somebody, and I'd be kind of like looking away because I didn't want looking. Oh, your eyes are moving. I'd be teased, right? And as I became through youth and adult, I'm like, hey. Oh, well, that's just who I am, right? But when I was a little kid, I used to be really cautious on it. And I came to realize, people looking around, other people have disabilities. And Yeah, and I just take people for who they are. So anyway, long story short, I want to go into an eye doctor. Oh, we could do a laser eye surgery on you. We can give you 20/20 vision, Brent. Imagine. Really? Yeah. So yeah, so what did you want to do? Did you want to schedule an appointment? I talked to my GP. What kind of eye doctor are you seeing here, Brent? You can't, there's no cure. That's not going to cure your condition. I'm like, well, that's what she said. Well, I think it's time to look for a new eye doctor. And I thought, wow, and they wanted to put eye drops in, and I was like, oh, and that made me feel really sick. Like I was just like really out of it because they were doing some just testing, just general. And yeah, live and learn, right? You live and learn, and you say, well, obviously they don't get it. It was just like medicine. Yeah, that's what they like, but they don't know about the physical part of how it affects a person over time, right? Someone's are more trained than other doctors are with it, but this was just a general eye doctor. Didn't know about conditions, and
well, that's what kind of goes back to what I said earlier about the fact that the doctors are more focused on the medical part of it, and the governments are more focused on some weird mix of a social model or medical model or something. I don't know what. And but really it's the people that are the advocates that are on the ground, boots on the ground, that are, we are the knowledgeable ones. It's not the government, it's not the doctors. I mean, the doctors have the medical knowledge, but they don't have the lived experience. I mean, the governments need to realize lived experience rules all, and that's why they have to listen to us, right? Because we're the experts that way.
Yeah, totally. Because I can give everyone an example. Like I went to, this is going back decades. I mean, how time goes by, right? But it always sticks in my mind, and I'm so grateful to this one eye physician that I actually end up bumping into every so often. It doesn't seem to, like, every so many years I go over and he's opened up a new clinic now. Now look, clinic is shut down now. And he relocates, and he actually went back to university. Sherry, he was actually I had gone to make an appointment one year, and because I was living in a different community at the time, and I needed an eye doctor, so I went. Oh, his shop used to be there. Oh, it's not there anymore. So I went, and there was another eye doctor, and they said, oh no, he actually is not in practice right now. Eventually he will. Oh, where did he go? Oh, he went back to Ontario. Yeah, he went to the University of Waterloo, and so he studied as a professor in political science, and his expertise, like, he wanted to learn more about also about eye conditions, and he studies, and he still studies my eye condition, and I was so amazed with him because, like, he knew, like, he would, I'd go into him, and I was so emotional because in my first time in my life, it's like, imagine not wearing glasses just temporarily, and I had tears running down my face, and I was just like, he goes, it's okay, Brent, it's okay. And he had trouble putting eye contact lenses in my eyes, because my eyes, when I was born premature. So preemie. So
me too, Brent.
So my eyes, it's like the doctor would describe it. It's like trying to get a pizza and trying to put through a small drive-through window. It's not going to work, right? But he managed to dilate my eyes so much that it would slow down the stigmatism, and I was getting really antsy because it was like he kept fiddling with my eye, this and that. And I felt like I was just like, oh man, I was like feeling nauseated. He says, okay. He says, hang on. So he gets this little, I'll get over the side. If you have to, then do what you need to do. I go, no, I'm fine, doc. And he goes, okay, so just relax. So I remember kind of sitting back in it's like a dentist chair, like sitting way back. And he goes, okay, bloom. I'm like, huh? Whoa, what's that? And he goes, now just kind of open your eye, look around. Oh my God. He goes, read the, it's like, read the teleprompter.
Yeah.
Like they did. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, oh, okay, what do you want me to see? He goes, read the bottom. Can you read the bottom for me? I go, the bottom? No, there's no way. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, no, like, I can't read that. I mean, most people can't. I looked at it. I could read every single letter all the way down. to the very bottom of the smallest. And what it was an experiment for him to see the progression of how is it for his studies, how would it cure? And so it told him that, yeah, like I had 20/20 vision temporarily. Amazing. I was like, oh my God, can I keep wearing them? He goes, unfortunately, the reality is no. You can actually, I'll let you wear them for like 4 or 5 hours. Go out and come back, go and have lunch. And he says, you know what? He gets his wallet out and he goes, you know what? Here's $30. Go and have a good lunch. What? $30? I go, wow. He goes, whatever is left over, keep it. Doc, no, it's okay. No. I want you to enjoy this moment of time and come back. And then you have to come back and you have to return the contacts so that, you know, I come back and then reality kicked in. But unfortunately, I was not able to keep the contacts in because for me, trying to put them in myself, it just wouldn't work. So, yeah, so I had an experience just recently over months dealing with optical stuff. And that was a hell of a time. Neil knows about the segments on that one. Yeah. But
there's the whole saga if you go back to the
space savers. But yeah. I got a new pair, new look eyewear, and these are great. And the eye doctor listened like really carefully to me. He says your vision is your vision. You can't mimic it and try to manipulate to make it seem something different than what it is. And so they make them really thin. And I use a multi-purpose reading. I've learned that, and I've been doing that since a kid. If it's something like a font, if it's too tiny, like that, right? Yeah. I just pull it a little bit closer, like an email, like something like that. I can't. Some of those you can't blow it on the screen. Yeah. You can't. And so I find it frustrating. So when I realize that, Sherry, I then read as much as I can, and then I say, okay, eye fatigue. Now put it down, and then move on. But some things I can blow it up, or I put it onto a screen reader. And that's another thing, right? That's another cost. I bought myself an iPad, and I did it for my podcast because why? It was the best investment that I had made for myself, and and I so much enjoy it because the screen is nice and big, and it's great for me. And I can sit back and I can read things from a distance there and
have your coffee.
Is that why you guys are on Twitter too? Because it's more accessible. Yeah. I started my group on Facebook because that's where I was at the time. And but I don't know that. And actually, our website, we're completely grassroots, just volunteers for 6 years, and we're now actually I'm trying to seek out some funding, which is really hard to find. Grants that are
that's what we're trying.
Political advocacy is like no, we're children. I found grants for advocacy if you're racialized or indigenous or child welfare, but disability is that other cousin, third lost cousin. So I even worry our website needs to be more accessible, but we need funding for all of that. And
I joked a couple of podcasts ago that the PWD community is like the band of misfit toys,
Oh yeah. Yeah, you remind me of was it Rudolph?
Yeah, the Rudolph, the band of misfit toys.
Toys,
Yeah.
But it's true though. It's we've all come together. We all come together about advocacy and trying to make the things better for people across the country, and it can be done. It can, and I know it will get done. I do. I have that optimism in me. Is that you can do and I learned this from a professor in college. Brent, you have the can-do attitude, and what you want to achieve, you will achieve because you're moving forward, and forward is the positive direction. And sure, you can look back in time and say woulda, coulda, shoulda, but didn't do. But you know what you can do because you're moving forward. You can create positive change. It may take time to make that change, but you need to network with people and bring them together. And I always remember, and I thank my instructor, on that because she taught me a lot. And she says, you're one of my favorite students, and I'm sorry that the course is now ended. I go, can I do this again? She goes, well, it's going to cost you. I'm like, well, I don't have that kind of money.
And the wisdom of Yoda, do or do not, there is no try.
Can I give you some ideas? So you probably know David Leposki. He's a lawyer in Toronto, very famous advocate, and he does a lot of advocacy in Ottawa on the Canada Disability Benefit. He's a friend of mine, and
David, never met him in person, but I've heard so many amazing things about David. He's awesome.
He's a force. So what I see him do, and what I think you guys should take up doing on your show, and also from Kate, is whenever he gives a speech or a talk, he gives everybody listening and watching a way to become politically involved. So like it to do, he says to take out their phone and tweet and like give his hashtag. And I think you guys should take that up because, and I'd like to kind of encourage anyone listening here that has a child with a disability or is a caregiver to take a moment, and if you're on Twitter, to tweet Carla Quattro and remind her about the child disability benefit. Like, don't forget about it, that these families are suffering. Or if Twitter's not your thing, to send a quick email. It doesn't have to be long and complicated. It just be, this is how you reach Minister Carla Quattro, or write to your MLA, or in Ontario, we have MPPs. And remind them that your children and the caregivers exist. And I would encourage you guys to kind of write that into your show as you're out there. Get it. I saw Kate talks about it a lot too, and David does it, and I think it's powerful because it could just have a little ripple effect. And that's one thing that get Neil to make a little note of that. And that's one thing that I do mention on my show too, is I encourage people to reach out to their MLAs, their MPPs, in say it was Ontario, or your MPs, your mayor, like even at city level, like put a little noise saying about accessibility to your mayors, and saying, hey, like accessibility wise, like what are you doing to make things better with the developers who are now developing these homes for people with disabilities. And if they say, like what we said earlier, you need to talk to your provincial government, go, okay, what are you going to do? You say, what are you going to do for me? Like, are you listening to me? What are you going to do? Or who do I contact? So then if that person now passes the buck, you know where to go back to. You say, well, this, and they say, better yet, to say, well, rather than doing this, why don't we get them all in the room at the same time, and we'll collaborate and have a discussion and a solution. And one thing I've learned too is everyone watching, is set a goal, and then set a target. The target to reach that goal, the steps to get to that goal. And once you get to that goal, you can say, okay, this is what I've accomplished, but is there still more to go? Yes. So you hit a target date. It's like the MLAs, they have mandates. MPs have mandates, MPPs, same thing. They have mandate letters. Do they meet all those targets within there? If they don't, why? Why haven't they? So it's kind of like in the same thing, is that we can set our target and say, this is what we want to achieve. And I think we can do these things if we all kind of intertwine with each other and create a movement across the country.
This is starting to feel like a TED Talk, Brent.
Yeah, people don't realize how powerful their stories are, though, and you're giving people an audience to share their stories, and there is power in that. And sending those emails and sending your stories, the more that we get people to be a little bit politically active, and like when you write to your or tweet Minister Carla Quattro, copy your favorite reporter at CBC, or and when people are brave enough to open up and share, I think there is value and change does happen. I know it happens in the autism community, and we see other things go through that. It could happen for the whole disability community as a whole. It's
a ripple effect, and it does. It's a whole ripple effect across different ministries of different children and family development, or the autism community, right? Accessible housing, like it's all different aspects, and it will be a ripple effect across, and we can create that movement of change. Go ahead.
Sorry, Brent. It was Sherry that first said the word ripple, and now you're saying it too. And I'm
the domino effect.
Yeah, and I'm an English lit major from university. That was my major, and so I'm big on metaphors. And when I think of ripple, I think of like
That's why we get along so well.
throwing a stone. Throwing a stone in a pond, and you throw a stone in the pond and you have that rippling out, right? So I'm a stone, I'm throwing it in, and you're a stone, you're throwing it in, and Sherry's a stone and she's throwing it in, and all of a sudden we got 3 stones and we're creating this huge ripple with the 3 of us here together. And if everybody did that, you'd have like a tidal wave at some point, right? And that's the idea. That's what you want.
I was always wondering, when I would go to the beach and I would throw a little rock, and I'd try to, the key thing to get a ripple is you look for the thinnest rock on a beach. And that's it's true though. It's like the thinnest little rock, and because it'll actually cause more of a ripple. Mm-hmm. So you throw it, or toss it, and it actually goes like a little bloop, couple of circles, and you see that. And I was always thinking, well, if I do that a few more times, how many more ripples can I make? Mm-hmm. And it's true. I'm glad you mentioned, because it's true. Is that ripple effect going forward, and how many more ripples can you cause going across?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we are at the top of the hour, so I didn't know if you want to do closing comments or.
Yeah, or did you want to be on for a few more minutes, Sherry, or we'll have you come back? It's all up to you. You're the
guest. You get to decide.
I know my daughter's bus is going to arrive soon, so we probably should wrap it up. But I certainly appreciate this time. I don't think enough people are talking about caregivers or children, and so my last words would just be: remember, disability, poverty begins at birth, literally when the children are born, and we need to keep kind of repeating that so the federal government can hear it.
Mm-hmm. We need to eradicate poverty in Canada. It doesn't need to. There's no room for poverty. It's legislated poverty, or however the government officials like to announce it as. Just respect the parents with children with disabilities. Respect each citizen with a disability. Nobody needs to be treated differently. We're all here. We're all citizens. We're all Canadians. It doesn't matter which country it is. I mean, anyone watching this around the world, just talk to your officials and do the same movement that we're doing. Create change, positive change, and we can make things so much better for everybody and all of our fellow citizens. I know we can do this. So Sherry, I want to thank you so much for taking your time today and coming on and talking about these very, very important, pressing issues that affect children from birth all the way to into their senior lovely lives going forward. Because a certain age doesn't stop disability, right? There shouldn't be a roadblock. So
poverty does, though. Poverty stops a lot.
Miss Control, if you're watching this, Miss Control, I need you to change that, right? I need you to please listen to the other advocates, not just myself, right? I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody because everyone talks about their own lived experience, right? So please start it from birth, right? Not 18 to 64, right? Start it from birth all the way through. There's no age limit. Just say this pension that you're coming out with is going to go to every person with a disability. Okay? Yeah. That's not difficult. It's
and
really
it better
not.
be more than $200.
Yeah.
Because $200 is not going to.
Yeah.
It could maybe buy you maybe 4 times a month of groceries. Last time I went, it was $56, and there was 6 items I got.
Yeah.
So yeah, so imagine 4 times. That's that wouldn't do too much. So I mean, it would help. It would help, but it's not going to do very much. It's not going to lift people out of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So
poverty is expensive.
It is.
Government shelter system, the food banks, it costs more.
It does. Yeah.
Than actually supporting individuals and families.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that amount that's coming out, it needs to be substantial enough to get people through all the cost of living, a living wage, a living income. And that's what it is. That's what it needs to be. So the next segment, I'll have you come back on, Sherry, and we'll dive more into about a living income. We'll talk on that part too.
And we do have again, we have Jeff Leggett coming on tomorrow, talking about the debrief with Sheila Malcolmson. So that'll be fun.
It'll be interesting. Yes, yes. And so everyone tuning in today, stay tuned. But first of all, I want to thank Sherry for coming on today. And I will mention that tomorrow we have Jeff Leggett joining us on our next podcast. And he'll be diving in about the recent meeting that we had with the minister, the Honorable Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction in British Columbia. And he'll be talking about the, exactly what we've been talking today on the podcast about the C22. I'm going to press Jeff a little bit about the child disability benefit, Sherry, what we've been talking about too. If I have time to do that. If not, we'll keep on putting pressure about making change going forward. Because change can definitely make a difference in people's lives for sure. But tomorrow, stay tuned, everyone. Just look at the podcast here and subscribe. And click on and all
like
the
us,
above.
Please.
Yeah. Stay tuned for our upcoming podcast, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
I just wanted to sing on the outro. Inch
Sure.
by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. Gonna make something like that, right?
Yeah.
We gotta move it inch by inch, right? Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you.
We can change things. Yeah, we are the world, right? Was that song? We are the world.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I've always loved that one. That was. I wish I could get the tune on that one. And yeah.
But then we get a copyright strike. We're not allowed to do that.
No, exactly. No. That's no go zone. But thanks everyone for tuning in today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.